Hey, welcome back to Debate Track and welcome to March. This month's topic for Public Forum: resolved. The United States should remove nearly all of its military presence in the Arab states of the Persian Gulf. Before we get started, all of the facts that I mentioned in this video are available for free in the evidence listed in the description below. Go ahead and click there and pick up yours for free. Also, please smash the like button and hit subscribe so you can get these topic intros for future public forum topics. A note on the wording, it's a little bit clunky. We're not taking the military out of the Middle East. We're not reducing bases in the Persian Gulf. We're removing nearly all of the military presence in the Arab states of the Persian Gulf. Come on, wording committee, what's up? So, nearly all, this wording is certainly going to take a lot of discussion. What can the US still accomplish in the region with a little bit of its military still stationed there? Is removing all the bases but keeping patrols and keeping arms sales still okay? This is going to be part of the debate. For pro, of course, we want to think of what is vital to keep there and argue that we can remove the rest while still keeping the benefits of a small presence that we leave there. For con, we want to maximize the removal of US presence and therefore maximize disadvantages. So don't let pro get away with leaving just about anything there in the Persian Gulf. There are 8 Arab states in the Persian Gulf. These are Bahrain, Kuwait, Iraq, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. In total, the US has about 45,000 troops stationed in those 7 countries, according to Axios 2020. Iran is not included for 2 reasons, both because they're Persian and not Arab, and also because they're a sworn enemy of the United States, and therefore the US doesn't have any military presence in Iran. So, the countries not directly topical are Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, and Syria, amongst other countries. For today's video, I have one framework that you can think of using for both pro and con, and 2 major contentions you can think of using. This is certainly not everything, but it will help to get you started. One framework I highly recommend for pro is US militarism. US militarism is always bad. Why? The US has more than 800 bases around the world. It has many wars ongoing, including the longest in its history, 19 years and counting in Afghanistan. Although we just signed a peace deal with Afghanistan with the Taliban, we'll have to see how that works out. Our recent wars only, have cost thousands of US deaths, hundreds of thousands of other people's deaths, displacement of millions of people, and trillions of dollars of US taxpayer money. This US militarism is bad for the US, bad for the countries we're going to, and it's bad for the world. It also distracts the US from bigger challenges, from innovation, from competing with China, from climate change, from polarization of the USA. There are big problems in the world and big things the US needs to address. The Persian Gulf is not one of them. The first contention I have for you on pro is a US-Iran war. So the status quo is like this. Priven 2012 says that US military bases continue to form a strategic envelope around Iran. Some 350,000 troops are stationed at 130 foreign countries around the world. Many are at or near combat zones in the Middle East. So obviously, Iran is very scared of the United States, and if they're taking action against the United States, it kind of makes sense. They are surrounded. Now, solvency. If the US withdraws from the region, will Iran step down? Karimi 2019 says that Rouhani said Iran was willing to, quote, extend the hand of friendship and brotherhood to Persian Gulf nations, and was even ready to forgive their past mistakes. Iran wants peace. The only thing getting in the way is the United States. What about impacts? Well, death, money, oil, and a worldwide economic crash will come if the US and Iran start to trade blows. In fact, any kind of skirmish between the US and Iran in the last year or so has seen oil prices skyrocket, stock markets go down, And this is only for minor things, for a few people dying, for a drone getting shot down, for a cyber attack. These things have big impacts. A real war would have huge impacts. One of the big impacts is US troops. A recent Iran attack against a US base in Iraq caused more than 100 traumatic brain injuries. And Iran still vowed even worse revenge on US troops around the world. So Iran is ready and willing to attack US troops, and if they go to the war, more US troops will die. This, of course, is bad for the US. The biggest impact has to be this. Afrasiabi and then Tessar 2019 said, quote, "Tensions between the US and Iran are spiraling towards a military confrontation that carries a real possibility that the United States will use nuclear weapons." This article describes in detail how the United States will use nuclear weapons as tactical strikes to make sure that the war between the US and Iran ends quickly. And I don't need to tell you, boys and girls, why that is bad. But let's not stop talking about nuclear yet. The next part is Iran's nuclear program. Dargahi 2020 said, "Iran is increasing its stockpile of enriched uranium with full speed." This was from an Iran atomic energy official boasting about how quickly Iran is building their nuclear program. Also, quote, "The situation remains fraught with many dangers, a potentially explosive, slow-burning crisis, which could eventually overshadow all others." So a US-Iran war could lead to deaths on both sides and a lot of money, but it could also cause the US to have a first strike, and it could cause Iran to accelerate their nuclear program even more than they are now. Contention number 2 for pro is cost. The US wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Pakistan have cost American taxpayers $6.4 trillion since they began in 2001. Now, these countries are not directly relevant, but they are in the region, and a lot of US policy is similar in these countries as in Iran and the Persian Gulf. That total is $2 trillion more than all federal government spending during the recently completed fiscal year. Further, more than 801,000 people have died in a direct result of fighting. Of those, more than 335,000 have been civilians. Another 21 million people have been displaced due to violence. Next, even if the US leaves the Persian Gulf, Europe can still provide the stability that the region needs. Quote from Reinsch 2020, who is not a good source, but let's leave that for your opponents to figure out. Quote, "The US called on the EU to take over the Middle East. Since then, Germany has significantly increased its involvement in Middle East affairs." Super nice, right? The next thing that it will cost the US to keep having wars and involvement in the Persian Gulf is opportunity costs. If the US is focusing its efforts in the Persian Gulf, it's not focusing its efforts elsewhere, and that might be a problem. The US has bigger military threats to tackle, namely China, but also a Russia that is constantly pushing the boundaries of US dominance. Quote from Snow 19, "The Pentagon can't seem to shed missions and requirements to better focus on great powers, especially China." This is from a resident fellow for the American Enterprise Institute. So, second contention, cost. Oh my God, we need to stop involving ourselves in the Middle East. The cost in every potential metric is astronomical and ridiculous. Is this a bunker or a bathroom? What do you think? The con framework I have to offer you today is that US hegemony is a good thing. There's a lot of good things about the US being the world's superpower. Many countries rely on the US military to keep them safe. In fact, some countries like Israel and Taiwan wouldn't exist at all except for the US military. Others rely on the US to keep them safe with bases and strong treaties like Korea and Japan. Still others, in fact much of the world, heavily relies on US arms sales, which is a projection of US power. This includes countries like Australia and Saudi Arabia. In the Persian Gulf, the US keeps oil routes safe from attack and maintains freedom of navigation, so Iran cannot close the Gulf entirely and seize control of the world's oil supplies, a huge part of the global economy. Contention 1 for the con side is simply that the US is needed. The US provides helpful and necessary services in the Persian Gulf. Leaving now would disrupt the delicate balance we've struck that protects not only US interests, but US allies and the international world order. There's a couple parts to this. The first is Iran. Iran is a threat to US allies. Iran has shown no hesitation to disrupt oil supplies, to bomb merchant ships, to destroy Saudi oil facilities, and even to directly attack US bases in the Middle East. Iran cannot be allowed to be aggressive in this way. Graham 2019 highlights the importance of military deterrence against Iran. Quote, America's growing volume of military assets in the Persian Gulf is about deterrence. Cook 220 also talks about the importance of containing Iran. Quote, containment is nevertheless the best option. It simultaneously reduces the risk of war, protects Americans, and renders the US presence in the region less expensive. Another big part is, as we've said, oil supplies. The Persian Gulf has a lot of oil and gas. From USA Today 2020, a name I'm not even going to attempt, more than 9,000 vessels operate in the area each day, and 1/6 of global oil production and 1/3 of the world's natural gas passes through the Strait of Hormuz. The US partnered with 6 countries last year to form the International Maritime Security Construct to protect the oil supply in the region. The IMSC says that since its establishment in September, there have been no recorded incidents at sea of what the US Navy calls malign activity or kinetic actions by Iran. In other words, missiles or blowing up boats or shooting at people. The second contention for the con side is power vacuum. If the US withdrew most of its military from the Persian Gulf, there are many powers who would want control of the region. So, who stands to gain the most? A, Russia and China. China and Russia are both allies of Iran and share weapons, missile, and computer technology with Iran. O'Connor 19 talks about the most recent developments in these relations with Moscow and Beijing. Russia, for example, has helped Iran to fight proxy wars against Saudi Arabia and against the US. If the US withdrew its forces, these two countries, two competitors of the United States, would be all about taking over. B, Saudi Arabia-Iran war. Saudi Arabia and Iran have been fighting indirect proxy wars for years now. With the US out of the Persian Gulf, both sides would try to vie for power, and it's not clear who would win. What is clear is that the conflict would be messy. There'd be major bloodshed on both sides, and China, Russia, and the US could all get drawn into such a conflict. And that, my friends, would be bad news. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe. If you want me to review your case, just upload a video of you giving a speech to YouTube with the word debate track in the title. Send me a message and I'll go ahead and give you some comments on what I think about your case, and we can open it up to the community so you can get even more feedback. See you next time. Bye-bye.